All right, let's get into the first order of business here, guys. We have the Michigan State at Iowa game. Of course, Michigan State 2-2. They've lost their last two, and then Iowa, they are 3-1. They lost their last game to Penn State, but they were on a 3-game winning streak to start the season. So Iowa is favored in this game by 12.5 points. This game is going to be on Saturday night, September 30th at 7:30 on NBC. It's going to be a great time there. Iowa, they lead this series 24-2 and two ties. So this series is actually pretty close between the two of them. They don't play regularly, obviously, because they're in two separate divisions of the Big Ten, but it's a close series. I think this is a very interesting game. I've not heard it talked about a whole lot, so I'm excited that we are able to preview it here. So we're going to go to Anthony with our first question. Anthony, what is your biggest concern for your team or about the other team going into this game?
So MSU, the last 3 games they've played in Kinnick, 2 of them, the 2 in front of fans were, they won both of those, and then they got blown out their last one. This is their first night game at Kinnick, and Iowa's typically pretty strong. In those night games, they've lost they've lost 7 of the 21 night games they've played. 6 of those 7 losses were against ranked opponents, so not great going into the matchup for Michigan State. My biggest concern for the team is just taking care of the ball. Iowa, historically, at least the last 4 or 5 years, they've been extraordinary at turning other teams over. I think they averaged 23 turnovers a season. I was looking it up. It was about 15 interceptions and about 8 fumble recoveries. So they had a knack for turning you over. And this year they're off to a bit of a slow start. I think they just have 3 forced turnovers so far, but all that screams to me is just that they're going to climb upwards towards the mean again. And last game, Michigan State had 5 turnovers against Maryland. And that we actually outgained Maryland in terms of yardage, but because we turned over the ball 5 times, a lot of times in plus territory, it either killed the momentum on a strong drive or it gave Maryland the ball in really favorable field position. So for me, turnovers are the scariest thing going into a night game at Kinnick.
For sure, and that ball hawking Iowa defense, they are always known for their turnovers, like you said. So, Jeffrey, let's go to you. What is your biggest concern for your team or about the other team going into this game?
Well, I think we can all answer what my answer is going to be for the biggest concern, which is obviously the Iowa offense. Darty put a tweet out earlier today that said, hey, this is the perfect offense to go against to get our defense's mojo back. And I DM'd him and I basically said, eat poop, right? Since we're continuing on with that theme, but at the same time, I can't fight it. It's obviously a truthful statement. So not expecting a points explosion from Iowa by any means. I think there's a little bit better defense that people give Michigan State credit for, or at least the matchup. Iowa's offense versus Michigan State. Michigan State gets touched up quite a bit through the air. Well, guess what Iowa doesn't even hardly attempt to do is throw the ball down the field. So it's actually a better matchup than maybe a lot of people are thinking. They probably already think that it's a good matchup for Michigan State's defense. So certainly that's my biggest concern. Help me out. What was the second part of that question right there?
Just about the other team. If you have a concern about the other team in general, with what they can do to stop your team.
Yeah. I actually just what I would say is I don't think what we just recorded on our podcast. And I said, I bet there's a decent amount of Hawkeye fans that haven't watched Michigan State play a ton. They're going to get to know a pretty darn good running back in Nathan Carter. I feel like if Michigan State was having a better year, maybe if they were just 3-1 or something like that, more people would know who Nathan Carter is. I think it's a good offensive line for Michigan State. Maybe not great, but it's good. So, I mean, there are strengths to this Michigan State team. I just don't think they've been able to really illustrate it because Washington just dog walked them, because Washington is amazing and they just turned the ball over like crazy versus Maryland.
So Michigan State's O-line is decent at quarterback protection. When it comes to run blocking, there's definitely some to be desired, which I think is why Carter isn't getting more love. That said, he's put up pretty strong numbers in spite of his offensive line. Kind of Kenneth Walker light. Kenneth Walker wasn't running behind a great offensive line when he did what he did. So you're seeing similar stuff from Carter.
Yeah, and that Iowa defensive front, they gave Penn State a lot of problems if you watch that game. At least there in the beginning. Obviously, the defense got tired throughout the game when your offense is off the field in 3 to 6 plays most of the time. It's difficult to stay energized enough for that. But Jeffrey, let's go back to you for this next question. Both teams, they have some negative storylines going into this game, right? Iowa, their offense, Michigan State, the whole Mel Tucker situation, which, we're not even going to talk about today because that's behind us and we've covered it extensively on here. But they both have negative storylines going into this way. What's the biggest positive for your team right now that your team needs to build on starting in this game, Jeffrey?
I mean, I could go a couple different directions. Anthony kind of already touched on it. This team gets fueled by special teams plays and forcing turnovers. Okay. If that happens in this game, to me, that's the only way that Iowa would potentially run away with it or even just, cover by the 11 and a half or 11 points, whatever, by a touchdown or something like that. Because I don't see a scenario where it's like a big time Iowa win. That's how it has to happen. It has to happen, forcing turnovers on special teams. Am I positive that will happen Saturday night? No. I got a feeling it might happen. Kim is pretty pass happy, and then Caden Hauser went in. I don't think he looked a lot better in that Maryland game. He kind of tossed him up to the defense as well. And then one more positive, if I could. I honestly saw snippets of a pretty nice looking rushing attack in each one of their first 3 games. People forget, like, Iowa State's actually a pretty good defense. Like, they have a pretty good defense most of the time in the Big 12. Iowa pop some plays with them. They're doing more hat on hat than just strict zone blocking this year. I think it's something that's still a work in progress, and they just ran into a buzzsaw that's Penn State. I think KF can get this team redialed back in so that they can get back to doing what they want to do, which is run the ball. I'm not saying exploding against Michigan State, but maybe a touch better than people would expect.
Well, and the new clock rules really help with that as well, right? I mean, I've said most of the season that this is kind of the bread and butter for most of the Big Ten right now. A lot of teams that really like to be run happy and really like to lean on their defense, they have this opportunity now to lean into that more. They can control the game of the clock better, and they can control how many plays the other team is going to run a whole lot better now than they did in the past. Anthony, let's go back to you. Same question. A lot of negatives. What's some positives that your team can pull out of this game and build on?
So Jeffrey kind of alluded to it earlier, which is that this is a better matchup for Michigan State. They, the last 2 teams that they played are pretty pass happy. And that's, even though Michigan State's secondary is better, it's still not where it needs to be. And so a team like Washington or Maryland is going to expose that. But in general, MSU's defense actually played pretty well against Maryland when they needed to. They were put in some tough spots, and a lot of the guys stepped up on that. The problem was the offense was turning it over and giving it to Maryland in really, really, easier spots to score. Honestly, I think that one of the more unsung parts of this team is just the talent and the youth on this team. There's some really good playmakers, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. One name that's been getting thrown around a lot is linebacker Jordan Hall. As a true freshman, he's doing things that true freshmen should not be able to do, getting thrust in some immediate snaps. So look for Jordan Hall to, it's hard to keep a guy like that off of the field the way that he's playing right now. In the secondary, obviously some, improved play. You're seeing, guys get more and more confident every week with Dylan Tatum and Jalen Mangham. So there's a lot of youth on this team, and they're finally starting to get more, cohesive together. So honestly, I think the staff needs to, in light of everything that's happened, they need to be utilizing those young guys and just getting more reps in. And the guys that they recruited so hard to come on campus, they need to play them the right way to get them to stay on campus, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Was I feel like this is one of those games for Michigan State. There's been talk because the those injury reports that they've been putting out. Michigan State's just kind of got a lot bigger after all the Mel Tucker stuff happened, and I thought to myself, man, if Harlan Barnett can just get, because this is the 4 game mark, right? If you play more than 4 games, you can't redshirt, right? And so I was thinking to myself, if Harlan Barnett can just get these guys to buy in and play, I'm not saying anybody's quitting or anything like that. I'm never going to accuse a player of that, but it is one of those things that we realistically have to realize is that this is a temptation for some of those players, and Harlan Barnett has to do his best to motivate guys to stay and keep playing. So, do you have any thoughts on that at all, Anthony?
Yeah, so obviously there's been a lot of clamoring amongst the Michigan State fans about who should be, taking the snaps under center. Everyone said, throughout camp it was neck and neck between Kim and Hauser, and then Kim got the nod, and he looked good for 2 games, but he did still start his games pretty slow. But now against the tougher competition, you look at it and you're like, man, is this going to be enough? And especially going on the road, we were told that he's supposed to be the steady hand. He's supposed to be the upperclassman. But if you're turning over the ball like that as the steady hand, why not run with the younger guy and get some, experience for a guy like Hauser, or even I'm hearing Sam Levitt's name thrown around a little bit as, people are saying maybe he could get the start. So it's tough. Everyone knows that if you've got 2 or 3 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. It does feel like that a little bit, but given the choice, if you're trying to invest in the future of the program, you're better off doing it with a younger guy, even if it isn't a brutal, night game at Kinnick. That's a tough place to throw a young quarterback.
Yeah, that's the hard part for Harlan Barnett is he's just trying to do his best for the team, but at the same time, he wants to win this head coaching job, I'm sure. He's been at Michigan State for a long time. It's very, very interesting. So, all right, Jeffrey, you got any more thoughts before we move on?
It's a tough spot for any young quarterback to go on, especially one that's, been turning the ball over. I do want to say, though, Noah Kim's athletic dude. When he can turn the corner and he pulls it faster than people think. And also, he was putting balls in places in that Maryland game that the wide receiver should have caught. They just did not come up with plays. So, I felt like maybe parts of the Michigan State play calling and playmakers haven't been helping that kid out either.
What I'll say is, as far as play calling goes, this might be a bottom 3 offensive coordinator matchup in all of the Big Ten between the conservative play call of Brian Ferentz and the, I'll say, situational issues that Jay Johnson frequently has with his play calling. I think this could be this has, if you know the Sickos Committee
right
Twitter account, this has their name written all over it.
I am sick of the Sicko Committee. Let me just make that statement right there. I'd like to get away from them sometime soon.
I really thought we were going to make it through this whole preview without going into Brian Ferentz or anything like that. And long behold, no. I just had to ask one more question, and there we were. So
no way we were going to let that stone go unturned.
Yeah. All right.
Speaking of Sicko Committee stuff here, our names are highlighted in green grass. JR's got a green shirt on. You guys ambushing me here with the Michigan State stuff, or what's going on, man?
I'm not God. I didn't make the grass green. I just put grass in the background, okay? We can go to Boise State's field and have blue grass if you want. Okay?
No, I hate that more. I promise you I hate that more.
Hey, kid you not, there's a high school here in my town. They have red turf on their football field.
Gross.
Wow. All red
all
and all black end zones. It hurts.
Does Iowa play on grass or on turf? I don't actually know.
It's synthetic grass, whatever you want to call it, field turf.
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense.